Okay. Before I continue, I'm going to give you a little heads up. I'm going to be making 2 videos today. The first will conclude the World War II series. That's this one. And the second will be sometime later, talking about something else I'd like to bring up to you guys. And to the women watching this, whoever they may be. Anyway, like anyone who... Actually, it doesn't really matter the gender you are. It really matters whether or not you're interested. Moving on. If you're interested in my videos, nothing else matters. Okay, so finishing up World War II. After Italy surrendered, Mussolini was dead, and now Germany had surrendered. The war was over in Europe. But then came Nuremberg, the trials of the highest-ranking Nazi officials. Many of them were hanged for crimes against humanity. Others hanged themselves to avoid trial, and the rest were all placed in prison for a long, ridiculously long amount of time. And then, after Nuremberg, the war moved over to Asia. We had dealt with Germany and Italy, but there was still one country left, Japan. And for months, we tried and tried to do just about everything we could. And we did, even up to the island hoppings. What is an island hopping? It's where we crash planes into the Japanese islands, full of people, so that the survivors can go down there and invade the islands. And they did. The most famous being Iwo Jima. And the story of Iwo Jima. Soldiers and officers alike go down to the island of Iwo Jima, and 6 of them plant the American flag. There's a statue of it over in Washington, D.C. And the sergeant, and not all of them were men. Some of them were boys, like no older than, some of them no older than 10. And the sergeant leading them said, no, and the sergeant who was leading them was not your typical sergeant. He wasn't all, yeah, listen here, maggots, you will go in there, you will engage the enemy, all that. No, he didn't speak to these boys like how he spoke to normal soldiers. He spoke rather calmly. He said, all right, boys, don't worry, we're going to win this war, and I'm going to get you back to your mothers. Which later led to an outrage by their mothers because not all of them came back. And he promised them that they'd all come back. So, yeah, didn't go over well for him. And then, after Iwo Jima, we tried for months to figure out how we were going to invade Japan. And something I believe I should have mentioned earlier. On the 12th of April, 1945, as the Third Reich was beginning to fall apart from within, tragedy struck America. On that April 12th, in the January of that year, the January of 45, Franklin D. Roosevelt had been inaugurated for a 4th presidential term. 4th. But he was 69 years old. Okay, I've heard numerous different sources about how old he was. Some say he's 69, others say he was 68. There's one that even says he was 63. So what I can guarantee you is that he was in his 60s. He was older than 60, but he wasn't 70 just yet. But the first I heard, he was 69, so we'll say 69. He was 69, and unbeknownst to the public, he was of fading health. And he died that day. But of course, before he did, he made a call to Harry Truman. Franklin D. Roosevelt's 3rd vice president in 4 terms was Harry Truman. Truman was told to come quickly, yet quietly, to the White House. And he succeeded, and to greet him was not his boss, the president, but the First Lady, who informed him of his death, making Truman the new President of the United States. And the one thing that sets him apart from all the others is he's the one who had to make arguably the biggest decision you ever have to make. During our war with Germany, the Germans and the US were in a race with each other to see who could develop the world's first nuclear bomb. Thankfully, the Swedish destroyed the Germans' capability to do so. However, Franklin D. Roosevelt recalled the 504th American Bombardment Division of the U.S. Army Air Corps to work on the Manhattan Project. And it was a secret project. Very few knew about it. The only people who knew about the Manhattan Project were the president, the scientists working on it, and the military personnel assigned to guard them. No one else knew. And soon enough, we succeeded. And Truman, who had just now been told what the Manhattan Project is, has to decide whether or not to use it, as he believed invading Japan would be nothing more than sacrificing American lives, something he desperately did not want to do. So he has to figure out whether or not to push the button. And he pushed the button. A plane dropped the world's first nuclear bomb, codename Little Boy, on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. And then Japan still does not surrender. They drop a second one, on codename Fat Man, on Nagasaki. And then there's a threat to drop a third one on Tokyo, right onto the Emperor's palace. And the Japanese are very well tied to their emperor. Without him, they have nothing. So to hear the threat that they're going to drop another one of those things on his palace is not good. It's not good. So then, Japan hangs Prime Minister Tojo for crimes against humanity. And the Emperor and the new Prime Minister declare surrender. And that is the end. And officially, on the 2nd of September, 1945, the greatest conflict in human history ended, but would later be preceded by the Cold War, a race between which was not really much of a war. We call it a war because, well, it was a conflict. It was a sort of a conflict of it's more like a psychological sort of conflict, like ethical sort of. It's an ideological conflict, but not a conflict between soldiers. There was the Korean War, the Vietnam War, which really don't count as wars, as there was no declaration of war from Congress. And then there's, you can read up on the Cold War somewhere else. I know most of it, but I'm not going to talk about it. Probably heard it enough already. And next video, I'll bring up something you may slightly be interested in.